There are moments in history that not only decide the fate of a country, but also shake the continent. Today, Togo is standing at that very moment. A small country along the Gulf of Guinea, considered a silent broker in West African politics, has suddenly become the center of a geopolitical storm. Why? Because Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso who ignited the AES flame, has issued a public invitation to Togo. That invitation is not a normal diplomatic protocol, but a drumbeat, challenging the ECOWAS order, which is bound by foreign powers. Where will Togo go? Will it cling to its old shackles? Or will it embark on a new trajectory of freedom and sovereignty? The answer will change West Africa forever. Backhand index pointing right if you believe this is more than just a regional story. Please like, comment and subscribe to the channel to follow this journey. According to multiple regional sources, Togo is seriously considering leaving the Economic Community of West African States ECOWAS after decades of membership. The reasons are not hard to understand. The organization, once expected to bring economic cooperation and political stability, has now become a tool for pressure, sanctions, and influence for outside powers. Togo, which has traditionally played a mediating role, now feels the injustice of marginalizing small economies while the interests are concentrated in the hands of regional powers. It was in this suffocating moment that Ibrahim Traoré's invitation to join the Alliance of Sahel States AES rang out like a bolt of lightning breaking the darkness. And Togo was forced to choose. There are prisons that do not need brick walls or bars. They exist in treaties, in economic terms, in resolutions drafted in remote rooms where the voices of small peoples are reduced to cold numbers. Togo has lived in that prison for decades called ECOWAS. A bloc created to promote regional unity, but over time it has become a tightrope that tightens around the weak, forcing them to bow to the might of a few large economies and outside powers. Ibrahim Traoré once said something that shook Africa: there are no chains as painful as those worn in the name of cooperation. And Togo is beginning to understand what that means. For a long time, Togo chose to stay neutral. When Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger fell into the vortex of sanctions, Togo still tried to be a mediator, maintaining a fragile balance between the two sides. But that balance is like walking on a tightrope, with an abyss beneath your feet. ECOWAS, instead of listening to the cries for help from the Sahel peoples, chose to punish. The harsh embargo hit not only the military leadership, but also the lives of ordinary people. Borders were closed, trade flows were paralyzed, the currency was devalued, and millions of people were thrown into a food crisis. Togo, a country with close trade ties with its neighbors, immediately felt the pressure. The port of Lomé, Togo's main gateway to the world, saw convoys of trucks carrying goods stuck. People were asking indignantly, why should we pay the price for decisions made in Abuja or Paris? Gradually, the answer became clear, because ECOWAS was no longer African, but had become a tool for manipulation by extracontinental powers. In closed-door meetings in Lomé, Togo's presidential advisors repeatedly warned, we cannot remain neutral. Neutrality in an unjust world is only complicity. The Togolese people, especially the youth, were increasingly frustrated with ECOWAS. They saw Mali and Burkina Faso rising up on their own, defying sanctions, still calling for self-reliance. They saw Ibrahim Traoré emerge not as a traditional politician, but as a warrior, ready to sacrifice himself to defend sovereignty. In the cafes of Lomé, in online forums, young Togolese began to ask each other, why do we remain in the ranks of the oppressors, instead of embarking on a new path? That question became the seed of a historic shift. The Alliance of Sahel States AES is more than a political bloc. It is a manifesto. An affirmation that Africa has the right to rewrite its own destiny, without anyone's permission. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, three countries that were once considered hostages of instability and crisis, stood up, turning the sword back on the oppressor. They declared their departure from ECOWAS, threw off the shackles of foreign power, and together established AES. Amid the cheers of millions of Sahel people, Ibrahim Traoré stood out as a symbol, young, determined, ready to challenge even the West. He not only talked about sovereignty, but also turned it into action, nationalizing gold mines, building a common military alliance, looking for new partners outside the old orbit. AES became a torch. And that torch is lighting the way for Togo. When Ibrahim Traoré sent out his public invitation to Togo, it was not a diplomatic gesture. It was a war drumbeat, a call to arms that transcended borders. Togo, a strategic country on the Gulf of Guinea, with valuable phosphate resources and an important port, was the missing piece for AES to step out into the ocean. If Togo agreed, AES would not just be a barren Sahel confederation, but a force with access to the sea, with global trade advantages. Traoré understood that. And he knew that if Togo left ECOWAS, the entire West African order would be shaken. But the decision was never easy. Within Togo, there were still hesitant voices. Some officials, trained and attached to France, feared that leaving ECOWAS would mean economic suicide. They warned of the risk of losing aid, losing markets, even being isolated. But the other side countered, what aid has ever helped us escape poverty? What market has really opened for our goods? For so long, we have been serving their interests. The debate grew more and more heated, and in the shadows, Togolese people began to speak out with their own anger. In small demonstrations in Lomé, people held up banners, "We don't want ECOWAS, we want AES." A student said on local television, "We see pride in the eyes of the young people of Mali and Burkina Faso. We want to be proud too. We don't want to bow our heads anymore." That voice, though not yet loud, resonated in the hearts of young people. And once the young people stood up, history would not repeat itself. In all these developments, the shadow of France and the Western powers could not be ignored. Paris understands that if Togo leaves ECOWAS, its influence in West Africa will be severely weakened. Togo is one of the few remaining links that maintains stability in the way France wants. Diplomatic missions rush to Lomé, making promises and warnings. But the Togolese people are too used to those empty promises. A Togolese journalist wrote in a local newspaper, "They are afraid not because we are weak, but because we dare to think about freedom." Togo is facing two paths. The old path, continuing to stay in ECOWAS. Maintaining a false stability, but it means accepting being suffocated, continuing to be an outsider in its own home. The new path, entering the AES, together with Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, reasserting sovereignty, opening a new page in history, but it means harsh challenges and the risk of direct confrontation with the West. Both paths are difficult. But one is shackles. The other is freedom. And history always belongs to those who dare to choose freedom. Will Togo have the courage to step out of the darkness? Will they dare to join Ibrahim Traoré and the AES fire to rewrite the map of West Africa? Just one decision, but it will determine not only the fate of Togo, but also the shape of an awakening continent. Loudspeaker if you believe that Togo's choice will become a turning point in the history of West Africa. Leave your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can follow this journey together, a journey of freedom, of sovereignty, and of an Africa rising up. There are people born to be politicians, and there are people born to be symbols. Ibrahim Traoré is not just a head of state, he has become a beacon of light for millions of young Africans. In a continent that used to bow its head, he stood tall, looked straight ahead, and said words that no one had dared to say before. We do not need permission from Paris. We do not need instructions from Brussels or Washington. We will rewrite our own destiny, with the blood and intelligence of the African people. Those words, echoing from Ouagadougou, crossed the Sahara, and now reached the shores of Lomé. Togo, a country that had been silent observers, now felt the heat spreading from that fire. AES did not emerge from lavish ceremonies, nor was it launched in five-star hotels with imported wines. It was born in the red dust of the Sahel, in cramped rooms where young military leaders met with a burning determination, no bowing. Mali, embargoed and isolated, stood firm, nationalizing its mining industry, and forcing foreign corporations to renegotiate. Niger, once considered a uranium warehouse for France, is now asserting its ownership of its resources and seeking new partners. Traoré's Burkina Faso, once a country engulfed in terror, is rebuilding its army, relaunching agricultural projects, and projecting an independent economic vision. AES is the crystallization of three wills: Mali's insurgency, Niger's toughness, and Burkina Faso's boldness. For Togo, AES is more than a new bloc. It is living proof that sanctions do not kill a country, only submission does. While ECOWAS imposes sanctions, AES turns pain into strength. While the West predicts collapse, AES demonstrates rebirth. Togolese people compare, they have been in ECOWAS for decades, but inequality is still rampant. The economy is still dependent. Meanwhile, after less than 3 years, AES has made the world talk about it with a mixture of respect and concern. A young Togolese once wrote on social media, "We have lived in the shadow of ECOWAS for too long. AES could be the light we need." When Ibrahim Traoré extended an invitation to Togo, it was not a normal diplomatic gesture. It is symbolic. AES is open. AES is not a closed club. AES is the way for all who want to be free. Togo understands its value on this chessboard. Unlike the 3 landlocked Sahel countries, Togo possesses access to the sea. The port of Lomé, one of the strategic deepwater ports in West Africa, could transform AES from a barren continental alliance into a global trade-connecting force. Traoré knows this. He sees Togo not just with the eyes of a warrior, but with the vision of a political architect. He understands, if Togo joins AES, the entire West African chessboard will change. It is not hard to imagine the anxiety in Abuja, Accra, or Paris. If Togo, a small but strategic country, leaves ECOWAS, it will be the biggest rift in the bloc since its founding. France would lose another coastal ally, meaning that AES could escape its economic siege. Nigeria, the economic powerhouse of ECOWAS, would see its influence severely challenged. Ghana, which had been confident of standing on its own economic advantages, would also be forced to reconsider its choices. ECOWAS would no longer be the gatekeeper of West Africa, but a hollow mass, trembling in the face of AES's rise. For years, Togo has chosen the role of mediator, trying to maintain a balance between the factions. But today's world has no room for timid neutrality. A Lomé-based political analyst once remarked, "Togo is used to living as a bridge. But sometimes, a bridge has to choose the shore to which it wants to cling." And now, Togo is not just an observer, but a decisive factor, whether West Africa will continue to be tied to the ECOWAS golden ring, or will enter a new era with the AES. In student forums, in Lomé markets, in community gatherings, people are starting to mention Traoré as a role model. A trader said, "We have seen ECOWAS promise development for years, but what is the result? Complicated border procedures. Small economies being swallowed up. In the AES, at least they dare to stand up for themselves." A female history student shared, "I have never seen an African leader speak about sovereignty with such determination as Traoré. If Togo goes with the AES, we will enter history." Those words, simple as they are, reflect a reality. The hearts of the people have begun to lean towards the AES. Traoré is not alone. He embodies a new generation, young leaders, unattached to colonial memories, unafraid of great powers. At 36, he became president of Burkina Faso, a country once considered a haven for terror. But instead of seeking protection from the West, he chose the path of self-reliance. He punished corrupt officials, he rebuilt the army from scratch, he sent a clear message: we will defend ourselves. The people of Burkina Faso call him the son of Sankara, a reference to Thomas Sankara, the legendary leader who dreamed of a free Africa. And now, that spirit has spread beyond Burkina Faso's borders, burning in the hearts of the people of Togo. Togo cannot stand at the crossroads forever. Time does not wait. With each passing day, the pressure from ECOWAS increases, and the opportunity to join the AES becomes more urgent. A wrong decision can bind a generation, but a courageous decision can open the door to history. Togo is hearing Traoré's call. And deep down, they know that this is not just an invitation, but an opportunity to be part of an African revolution, a revolution that will reclaim its destiny. If Togo joins AES, West Africa will never be the same. But will Togo's leaders have the courage to challenge ECOWAS and the West? Will they be able to turn the aspirations of their people into reality? The answer is still unclear. But one thing is certain: Traoré's shadow, with his bright eyes and fiery voice, is imprinted on Togo's mind. And the AES flame is waiting for them to light a new chapter. Loudspeaker, if you believe that Traoré's call is the guiding light for all of Africa, share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join us on this historic journey.
There are decisions that, when announced, make the whole continent tremble. They are not cold statistics, nor are they closed-door meetings full of formalities. They are declarations that sound like thunder that rips through the night, forcing everyone to listen. The news spread throughout Lomé then reverberated to Bamako, Niamey, Ouagadougou. Togo officially considers joining the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. No one could believe it. A coastal country, which had played a mediating role within ECOWAS, was now bowing to the call of the Sahel. It was more than just diplomatic news, it was a shock. A turning point that could reshape the whole of West Africa. ECOWAS, which had thought itself an unshakable fortress, now saw its walls cracking. In the conference rooms in Abuja and Accra, the atmosphere was heavy. Nigeria's biggest fear: if Togo leaves the bloc, Abuja's regional economic control will be severely diminished. If AES has a port, it's game over, a Nigerian official blurted out. Ghana was shocked, a neighboring ally that had been close in trade was about to part ways. Ghanaian corporations began to worry that goods would flow to the port of Lomé instead of Tema. Ivory Coast was silent, but the worry was clear: an AES Togo would mean ECOWAS would lose another strategic gateway. The bloc was shaken. And in that shaking, people realized one thing: AES was no longer an experiment. AES had become a real force. In every conversation about this turning point, the name Ibrahim Traoré was mentioned most often. He not only sent invitations, he also gave a roadmap: military cooperation, infrastructure connectivity, resource sharing, and most importantly, absolute respect for sovereignty. In Lomé, many intellectuals commented, Traoré did not bribe Togo with dollars. He won them over with trust. This worries the West more than any weapon. Because no sanctions can block an idea, and no army can extinguish a spreading belief. Togolese people, rising aspirations. On the streets of Lomé, small protests began to appear. Young people carried Togolese flags alongside the flags of Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. Slogans were hastily written on the walls. AES equals freedom. ECOWAS equals chains. A farmer told the local newspaper, "We saw AES resisting sanctions, and they survived. So why should we be afraid?" A teacher said frankly, "If Togo stays in ECOWAS, we will be held back forever. But if we go with AES, we may lose, but at least it will be a loss in the journey to freedom." An entire nation is filled with aspirations. And Togo's leaders cannot ignore this wave. In Paris, an emergency meeting is taking place. France understands this better than anyone: AES plus Togo equals the collapse of the neo-colonial control. If AES has a gateway to the sea, Niger's uranium, Burkina Faso's gold, Mali's cotton and cattle will no longer be strangled. They will find their way to the world, without going through ECOWAS or France. In Washington and Brussels, people are also worried. Because Togo is not just an internal African affair. This is a sign of a new liberation movement, which can spread from the Sahel to the whole continent. The Togo government has not announced its final decision. But in a recent speech, a senior official told Parliament, "We will not let Togo remain a pawn on someone else's chessboard. Togo must be allowed to choose its own path." The statement, simple but resonant, brought many citizens to their feet and applauded. It was not an immediate declaration of AES membership, but an implicit promise: Togo would not turn its back on history. As Togo considers joining the AES, other countries are starting to ask themselves questions. Guinea, having long gone its own way, it may now seek stronger ties with the AES. Sierra Leone and Liberia, voices in civil society are beginning to call for a break from ECOWAS influence. Benin, some young politicians openly express their admiration for Traoré. The AES, once a three-nation bloc under embargo, is becoming a political movement spreading across West Africa. Meanwhile, ECOWAS is not sitting still. From Abuja, a chilling message is being sent. Any country that leaves ECOWAS will face serious economic and security consequences. It is a threat. But in the hearts of the Togolese, it rings like a confession of weakness. Because a bloc that is confident in its strength does not need threats. Only when it feels out of control does it resort to such language. African history has witnessed many moments when a small country, with a bold decision, changed the continent. Ghana in 1957 started the wave of independence. Guinea in 1958 rejected the French community. Burkina Faso in 1983, under Sankara, awakened the dream of freedom. And now, the question is, Togo 2025, will it have the courage to continue that history? Loudspeaker if you believe Togo should choose freedom over chains. Leave your comments. Share this video/article to let the world know that a new chapter for Africa is beginning. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next developments in this historic fight. In the presidential palace in Lomé, the lights remained on all night. Advisors argued fiercely. One faction warned, if we join AES, we will face immediate sanctions. Another countered, but if we stay in ECOWAS, we will slowly die of dependence. Outside, thousands of young people chanted Traoré's name. They were impatient. For them, the future lay not in Abuja or Paris, but in the courageous decision of the Togolese government. Togo was on the brink of a historic decision. Once the pen is signed on the AES treaty, everything will change. The AES will have access to the sea. ECOWAS will lose its legitimacy. The West will tremble before an Africa that is standing up for itself. But at the same time, Togo will face unprecedented pressure, sanctions, threats, even coup attempts. History is never free. Freedom always comes at a price. And Togo must ask itself, is it willing to pay the price in exchange for a place in Africa's new era? No journey to freedom comes without a price. As Togo moves closer to the AES door, an underground storm suddenly erupts. Forces that have been silent for so long begin to emerge. And the harsh question arises, will Togo be strong enough to withstand it before its hand touches history? Soon after news of Togo's consideration of joining the AES spread, a series of foreign advisors appeared in Lomé. They brought warnings, promises, and threats. A European delegation met discreetly with senior officials, promising hundreds of millions of dollars in aid if Togo remained neutral. A representative of a Western power publicly warned, if Togo leans toward the AES, we will review our security and trade relations. A leaked confidential report revealed unusual movements of foreign intelligence agents around the capital, Lomé. The signs were unmistakable. Togo had entered the eye of a global confrontation. But it wasn't just the enemy outside. Inside Togo, divisions were also brewing. A faction in the government feared, the AES is too reckless. We are small, how can we withstand the embargo? The other side, mostly young politicians, argued, if we are afraid, we will never be free from our chains. The parliament was shaken. Fierce debates raged through the night. The state-run press and the independent media attacked each other fiercely. In the dark, rumors circulated that a group of generals was being mobilized to protect the stability of the country, another way of saying a coup. In Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey, the news made the AES leaders uneasy. They knew that if Togo were to be overthrown or subdued, it would be a fatal blow. Traoré called an emergency meeting with his allies, stressing, if Togo falls before it can enter, it will be a signal to the enemy that the AES can be cut off at its roots. We cannot let that happen. But the solution was not simple. AES cannot openly send troops to defend Togo, because that would be used as an excuse for ECOWAS and the West to intervene. They can only send political messages and covert support. An anonymous figure in Togo's security circle revealed, there are people who want to stop this decision at all costs. Not only by resolution, but by violence. Rumors of strange armed shipments pouring in across the border. Secret militia groups began to appear in the suburbs. Togo, a small country, suddenly became an underground battlefield of global powers. Among the people, faith still burned. But fear also crept in. Small business families worried, if the embargo comes, how will we survive? Students and young people were more determined, if we back down today, tomorrow we will have nothing to lose. Togo was on the border between freedom and chaos. And it all depends on one decision, will their leaders have the courage to step forward, or will they be swallowed by the storm? Togo has not yet said its last word. AES has not yet secured a new ally. The West has not played all its cards. And the darkness of conspiracy is still thick. But one thing is clear, once Togo takes another step, there is no turning back. History has opened the door. But before it can step through, Togo must survive the hidden storm. And the whole of Africa is holding its breath, waiting. In the dark night on the West African border, Togo is facing more than threats and sanctions. This small country is facing the most sacred question, choose the silence of fear, Or the voice of freedom. Because joining AES is not just a diplomatic decision. It is an affirmation that Africa is no longer on its knees. It is a declaration that small countries have the right to rewrite their own destiny. Free from the shadow of empire and external imposition. Just imagine, if Togo dares to step forward, the domino effect will be unstoppable. Guinea, Benin, Chad, even the strongholds of ECOWAS will have to rethink. And then, the power map of West Africa will change forever. This is no longer a story of Togo or AES alone. This is a great song of an awakening Africa. Backhand index pointing right if you believe that the spirit of freedom of Togo and AES deserves to be spread. Please like, comment and subscribe to the channel. Let your voice be a part of this journey. Now it is our turn to keep the flame burning together.